All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Friday night with your very, very attractive hosts, me and this guy. Whoop, wrong way. This guy to the right, to the left of me. What? I don't know. I'm all backwards here. Why don't you go ahead with your very fantastic, awesome introduction that you have come up with, my friend?
Uh, Hi, I'm Mike. We'll shorten it. I got another year older Wednesday, so I like to pace myself.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thanks. Don't want to overdo it.
All right. Well, that's Mike McMahon right there. I am the very attractive, the very sexy, very distinguished, always narcissistic, but never vain, oddly enough. A staunch defender of Rob Liefeld and a lover of all things 90s. Joseph Michael Sonntag, or Joe M. Sonntag if you prefer, or as the Pope likes to call me, JMS. Welcome to the show, everyone. The Otten Stuff Show. Shout out to Sean. We miss you, brother. We will see you soon.
Yes.
Well, we have a very exciting show. And just talking to our guests here in the back stage area, that's what we want to call it, I think we're going to have some really interesting, fun conversations to have. So without further ado, our guest today is a veteran of the comic scene, the veteran of conventions, fantastic artist, and done a lot of cool shit. So we're going to bring him on right now. Our guest, special guest, Phil McNulty. How's it going, brother? How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey Joe, hey Mike, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Definitely, man. Thank you for being able to join us. Crazy times we're living in, but I'm glad that you took this little bit of time out of your precious Friday night to spend it with us. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. I mean, we're in COVID land, so I'm glad to at least still be doing things that I love while in quarantine.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, at least for artists, that's kind of nice. I mean, it's not nice what's going on in the rest of the world, but if you are going to be confined to your house or you're going to spend more time at home in your office, at least you're able to be creative and draw. So, I mean, it's for artists, it's not all that bad. I've gotten a lot more work done over the last few months than I ever did before. That's for sure.
It's so nice to not have distractions. I mean, the whole world is a giant distraction, but when you eliminate every problem outside of that, and you're forced to be right there at your drawing table, whether it be paper, pencil, you got pen, whether you're doing an iPad, doing it digitally, it's nice to just sit down, and when you have an idea, you can just roll with it. Like I haven't had that time in so long to just get an idea and then just start sketching it right away.
Right. That's always a nice flow. Interesting show, nice hosting too. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for checking it out. I don't know if this is your first time, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And hopefully you enjoy it. Share it. Tell all your friends. Tell them about us. Well, Phil, I want to jump right in here because it sounds like we might have a lot of interesting things to talk about. So without further ado, why don't you give us your origin story, how you got into comics, your love for comics, all that sweet shit. Put a cherry on top and let's fucking roll.
All right, let's do it. So I started drawing when I was 3. My mom got me a Spider-Man coloring book. So I'm a twin, and my twin, he's a huge Captain America fan. But back in 1990, Captain America wasn't Captain America. It was all Spider-Man, X-Men, the greatest years of comics, that greatest decade, anything from the 90s. So I just drew my own Spider-Man on the back, and I gave it to my brother. It's like, here's Spider-Man's twin. You can draw, you can color him in. But my dad collected comic books before I was born, and ever since then, I just stumbled upon all of his comic book collectibles, and I just picked up a pencil and started drawing everything since then. And I just always knew that I never had a backup plan. I always just said, I'm making comic book artwork my life, and it's done some pretty cool shit throughout the years. But I was never formally trained, never went to art school. In fact, the first art class I took was in high school, and my teacher saw what I was doing, and she was like, comic books aren't art, and it's a lowly profession. So I dropped my art class and said, well, fuck this. Well, am I allowed to curse?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Curse away.
So I thought like, fuck this. I'm being an artist. I'm gonna do it myself. And my dad would actually, I would give my drawings to my dad because, your mom loves everything that you draw, and
True.
she's like, oh, this is beautiful. Let me put it on the fridge, right? But my dad, being the comic book nerd that he was, and sharing that fandom, and a lot of parents are like, ooh, my kid wants to be an art, don't do it. My parents were the opposite. They were like, go do what you love, follow your dream. And my dad was like my little editor at the time. Like I was in high school
That's
and I would
awesome.
do drawings and I would give him my drawings and he would be like, his chin's too long, like this looks weird, like, because it doesn't really take like a rocket scientist to tell like when a body proportion is off, right? But when you're drawing it, you just need that feedback for someone to tell you it's wrong. So
That's awesome.
so it wasn't till like college when I took my first art classes, and it was a whole different experience because I graduated from Stockton College, in Stockton University now, which is in like right outside of Atlantic City in New Jersey. And I was an illustration major, and it was totally different because I walked in and like my academic advisor was like, well, what can we do to make you the best comic book artist possible? So that's when I took a lot of I took an anatomy class for like medical illustration, which was like I think probably my favorite class because you could see how muscles worked and you could see how they looked, how they folded on top of each other, how they bend, and that sort of kind of took what I taught myself and was the final piece of the puzzle. And you learned all the
Nice.
principles of design, and so it makes you like I love. So I mean, I grew up in the '90s, so my favorite artists are your Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, my holy trinity of artists, and then I love Mark Silvestri,
Oh yeah.
Eric Larson, all the founders of Image. Because when I was a kid, I went to the comic book store and I saw Wildcats. And back then, like I just knew I loved how these characters looked. I saw Youngblood, I saw Spawn, and I remember my
Yeah.
dad picked up Spawn and he was just like, maybe we won't buy this one for you. But he bought it and kept it away for later. So like I still
Yeah.
have those issues. And when I was older, he's like, here you go, you can.
How old were you when that age, I guess? Because I was
I
like about
was
12 when I really got into that, and I was all Image when I
Yeah.
got into it.
Let's see. Image was so I was about like 6, 7 when I was because my dad would always take me to the comic book store, and he would buy comics on his way home, and he just took me to the comic book store, and I said I wanted this, this, that. I remember the Grifter action figure I wanted so bad as a kid, and
Cool character.
my dad was like, "You sure you don't want this?" Like I'm a big Gambit fan. He's my favorite character of all time.
Yeah.
So so he's like, "You sure don't want a Gamma figure?" But I wanted that Grifter figure with the mask, like bandana mask, so bad.
I
So
always thought
that
he was like the Gambit of the Wildcats, and then the mask and then the guns. It was like Gambit, but like turned up to 11, and that I was the same way. I love Gambit, love Grifter as soon as I saw him.
it's sort of what like because I'm in the middle doing my own creator-owned series. Like I'm good friends with one of my best friends in this planet is Mark Polton. He was a guest a few weeks ago. He's worked with Mike
Yep.
for U.S. Assassin, but he does graveyard shifts. He worked on Hawkman for DC, and he just was like, he really opened my eyes to doing creator-owned stuff. Because for the better part of for basically over a decade, I was trying to get into Marvel and DC for so long, and he was just like, "Hey, Phil, I had the best year of my career ever with Graveyard Shift. Like, go do it." So I was with my best friend Ryan Brady, who's also a comic creator in New Jersey, and we were hosting a podcast a few years ago, and we talked about how much we loved Image, and we said, "Well, Wildcats is just X-Men, right?" So we were comparing it. So we were just making up. So we said, "Who's really big?" The Avengers are really big, so we're creating our own characters
Right.
based off of the Avengers, and we're giving them goofy names. Like we're like, "Oh yeah, this is totally." Like one character I created is his name's Strongbow, just because I love Youngblood. I'm like, well, I love Shaft, so I'm like,
Yeah.
Hawkeye's big with the Avengers, right? So we were creating these characters, and we looked at each other, and we're like, all right, we got to copyright this because this is like total '90s like love of Image. So that's what I'm actually working on now because I wanted
Nice.
to make that a reality. And now that I have the summer off, I'm like, well, I'm gonna go do it.
That's awesome. So how did you get? Because talking backstage, I know you got some really interesting people you've worked with. And I think you have a very unique path to a lot of guests. You getting the lightning right back there, Mike? You trying to make
Oh,
sure
my
the
camera
sexiness
sucks.
comes through?
My camera sucks.
But you have a really interesting path of how you got into things and the people you've worked with. I think that's really awesome. So after college, I guess, or whatever you were saying, where did you go from there?
So I went. I was answering ads on Craigslist with the height of the Craigslist killer. So I was either going to get a job or I was going to get murdered, and I figured, well, I got nothing to me now, so getting murdered is not the worst thing. I just saw an ad for comic book artists because after job interview, they're like, "You should be doing comics." I'm like, "Yes, I know, but I also don't want to live with my parents for the rest of my life." And so I answered an ad on Craigslist for comic book artists, and it was and the guy was Mariano Nicieza, Fabian Nicieza, X-Men,
Yeah,
Deadpool, writer. And so he was like, "Hey, and he was an editor in the '90s for Marvel, and he's like, "Hey, I really like your stuff. Would you like to work on this comic book?" And it was for RZG Comics, and they were known for doing like scantily clad, like calendar stuff. And he's like, he's like, "I want you to do this character," and it was just supposed to be like a backup issue. So for the villain called the Blue Sultan. And I said, well, I'm going to make this the best damn Egyptian fighter, evil Doctor Doom motherfucker that I can make him. So I did a backup part, and he was like, hey, let's make it a full-on series because this is too good to just be in the backup of the character's name was Phaser. And he's like, this is too good to just be a backup. So I ended up working on that independent book for like 2 issues when at the same time there was Kevin Smith, filmmaker, director, was his animator for a Smodco cartoon show was leaving to do the Super Groovy movie. So they had a void that they needed an animator to fill for his regular cartoon series that he would drop on YouTube weekly. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. It was a 2-minute video, 2-minute cartoon they wanted, Batman versus Darth Vader. So I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. Like before his movies, I just loved.
Yeah.
To me, Kevin Smith was my favorite Green Arrow writer because I loved Quiver. And back in high school, my friend was like, "Oh, you like Clerks?" I'm like, "What?" So I ended up watching his movies, and just falling in love with his movies. But because to me, I just loved his comic book work.
Yep.
So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna do a 2-minute cartoon of Batman versus Darth Vader and a game of Guess Who. And so Batman guesses on the first shot because he's the world's greatest detective, and they do jabs at each other. And so I ended up winning because the winner of the contest got a job, and I ended up winning the contest. So I ended up working on his cartoon series for 2 years.
Nice.
And I did. So I would listen to his podcast, and then from there, and the only reason why I like won was Kevin was just like, you draw a kick-ass Batman, and I would like. So he's like, I just want that style because he saw my artwork. He's like, I see your like Liefeld, Jim Lee in like McFarlane influence out the asshole. He's like, I want you to draw us in that style. So I did So I did cartoons for them, and at that same time, while now working for animation for Kevin Smith and doing the independent work for RZG Comics, William Shatner's company acquired RZG Comics, and they were like, well, here's some of the artists we have on staff. Who do you want? So Shatner said, oh, I like this guy. So he ended up picking me. So I was working on both things at the same time. And
that's awesome.
Like, I mean, I grew up on Star Trek. I'm a big geek.
Yeah.
So
Hey, it's all good.
My dad, every Sunday morning, I'd hear the do. So I watched Star Trek every Sunday morning with my dad, the original series for Star Trek. And so I was like, oh my God, Dad, William Shatner, right? So we kind of geeked out.
It's too
And
cool.
it was awesome because like he is just like the coolest, most unique dude in this world, and how he talks like on his movie roles and TV roles is how he talks in real life. And you're just like, and the coolest thing was he was like, because I'm relatively younger looking, I got a real baby face, and I was 28 at the time, 27, 28, and we met at a production meeting, and he was just like,
What
he
up,
was like,
Mark?
"Hey, Mark,"
Yeah, Mark.
and so he was like, how old are you? And I was like, oh, I'm 27. I'm turning 28 in a couple weeks. And he's like, you look like you're 16 years old. So he referred to me as like his 16-year-old.
Nice.
So like, and then we had to do a dinner back in not to go on a tangent, but
Go for it.
With William Shatner, he's so cool. And I was at Wizard World in Philly a few years ago, and they said, all right, we're gonna launch the Man of War series at ACBC, which is the Atlantic City Boardwalk Con, and they said, it's going to be a big deal, but we're all on the West Coast now, and the only person on the East Coast who can run this is basically you, Phil. And I'm just like, what? And they're like, yeah, you're gonna have to. So I had to go and set up the thing, and I had to go to the convention. I had to speak with the people and be like, yeah, Mr. Shatner, we're gonna do this with Mr. Shatner, bring him in, and he always be like, don't call me Mr. Shatner, call me Bill. So I'm just like, all right, Mr. Shatner. So one night we had to go, and I didn't have a car at the time. My car was dead. So I was like, oh, man. And I was like, what a shitstorm for this to happen. So I had to ask my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, can you drive me to the convention and set this up? And she's like, oh, okay, right. Because God bless my mom. Like she would go to very early on when I was fresh out of college, and I would need help to set up at these conventions and shows. She'd be there, help me run my table and stuff. So like my mom was just so excited. I was like, my car's not working. I'm really gonna need you. Can you really drive me to the show in Atlantic City? And she's like, fine. Like, yeah, that's fine. So I'm there setting it up, and I get a phone call, and because I was supposed to have a production dinner with Mr. Shatner, with Bill later that night, and so they're like, oh, his plane's coming in early. We may need you to pick him up from the airport. So I turned to my mom. I'm like, hey, Mom, get the minivan ready because we may have to pick up Captain Kirk from the airport. So so his agent calls me. He's like, don't worry, we got him a limo. He'll be fine. Just meet him out there. So I had to tell the colorist on the book, Wilson Ramos, a real good dude. And my editor Frank at the time, I was like, hey, we're gonna have to go here. And he was just like, I don't know if I can make it, Phil, because I'm stuck in Greenwich. I'm not gonna be able to make it in time. So dinner's supposed to be at 8:30. So his flight gets in at 7:30. Dinner's now at 8. So I'm like, you gotta rush here. So we go, and I'm the only one there. And he's like, Bill, my 16-year-old, right? I'm like, hey, how you doing, Mr. Shatner? He's like, what'd I say? I'm like, hey, Bill, how's it going? And so we go to like this restaurant in AC, and we go in the back, and we're chatting, and he all of a sudden he just gets this like big purple bag, and he pulls out like this giant thing of whiskey, puts it on top. And he's like, do you mind? I'm like, no. He's like, I'm going to split some. So it's like this $300 bottle of whiskey. So he pours me a glass. And me being the like idiot that I am, like cough on this straight shot of whiskey. I'm like, oh, he's like, it really gets you, doesn't it? Right? I'm like, so like I was telling him the production. I mean, I'm like, all right, so they're going to introduce you, then they're going to introduce me, and then we're going to talk about how your work and how like what you wanted visually and with the notes you sent me, and right. So all of a sudden, like this music starts like blasting, like bum 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 bum, and he's like, I can hardly hear you. So he goes to the waitress and he's like, excuse me, ma'am, me and my colleague here are having a very important meeting. We're going to need this music down. And she's like, oh, we can't do that. And he's like, oh. He's like, can I speak to a manager? So the manager comes out. He's like, what is this noise? We're trying to have a meeting here. We booked this table. He's like, oh, we do this every Friday night. And he goes, not tonight. Right. Shatner goes, not tonight. So you hear bum, ba dum, ba bum, ba bum.
Nice.
And I'm like, the fucking power of Captain Kirk just like shut down this AC thing. And it was like super surreal because like never in my wildest dreams would I think I was working on just a comic book series. And and with William Shatner, for crying out loud. Like, and
That's
what's
crazy,
cool
man.
is the thing is people are like, oh, did he really write it? And you're like, yes, he really did write it. You think from reading thousands of scripts, you know how to write, especially, and the book was a sci-fi book, like, and he's a big
Right.
history buff. So you'd think a guy that intelligent in the business would know how to write. So, and it was cool because I really learned a lot of storytelling from that experience because he came at it with a director's eye. And he'd be like, I want this shot to look this way. And you wouldn't have pictured that because you're just drawing what you think. And it really made for some dramatic poses and storytelling and scene setting that I think it was one of the most valuable experiences in my career, is to actually work with someone who found an interest in comics but has an actor director point of view, because you don't normally think that way yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. What's up, Raymond? Thank you for checking out the show.
What's up, Raymond?
Good to
Yeah,
have
he
you.
did. He did Tech World comics off of his novel series in the '90s too.
Yep, it was Man of War and Tech World, and so they did Man of War, and it was, to me, it was so funny because like he just like he cares about it, and like he cares about it so much, and you think, oh, he's entering comic books, what would he care about it? And he seriously loves comics, loves the medium, and he cares because now it's a thing of it either fails or it succeeds, and he's a man who wants 100% success all the time.
Right.
So like setting up the convention, I told my dad, I said, listen, I need you to run the computer. You can run the projector. So when you had to play because it was a motion comic, we had a trailer for it and all that. I told my dad, I'm like, listen, he loves to shake everybody's hand. You can shake his hand when he's done the panel, right? I said, Dad, go ahead, do it. All of a sudden, like if the panel's ending it, and like my dad was just like in awe, right?
Yeah.
He missed his shot to shake William Shatner's hand at the end of it. And I said, Dad, you froze up. And he's like, I froze up because there's my son, like laughing with William Shatner and getting a hug from him and like just enjoying the time. He's like, that's what I wanted to see from my son.
That's
So,
super cool.
so like I think, so like currently now I'm actually an art teacher for a middle school in Trenton, New Jersey, and it's it's a lot of urban community because I grew up around the Camden area. Like I love being in that inner city, and I just realized people need that influence. Like I had a lousy, shitty art teacher in high school who told me comics weren't a profession, but I had my dad behind me tell me. So I was at a convention in Camden for Rutgers, and they got me into the classroom, and I saw these kids like just love comics as much as I do, and I thought, screw it, this is like a big calling for me. So I ended up getting into the art teaching field because once you love art and you love comics and you see that enthusiasm, you just want to like teach it more.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. That's awesome. It's funny that back in the day, it was kind of like you would hear people say like, oh, comic books aren't art. Like for some reason that didn't register on somebody's level of what art should be, and I was just like, fuck you. What do you mean it's not art? Of course it's art. People
I always got told you're not an artist, you're a cartoonist.
Yeah, what I mean? Like, you're a fucking artist. You're drawing, you're creating. That's what you are.
Like I remember before I dropped the class, I put together a whole thing for my teacher. Her name was Acton, and Ms. Acton. I was like, I put together like So I showed foreshortening, perspective, color theory. Right. I was like
Nice.
line, shape, color. I was showing, so I was teaching the principles of design, and I was teaching her like this is why it's comics, and I dropped it. So after college, like my artwork was featured in like the Atlantic City Press because I did for my senior project, I did like a giant comic book pages of like my life, like fantasizing a moment of my life with my cat and making myself like Robin because I love Robin, and like fighting this giant cat beast, but it was just like my parents. And she friend requested me on Facebook after it was
Nice.
on, and I didn't even decline it. I just left her in my like wall of shame, so they never like accept or deny. But it was like, but it's so that always was like a mission for me to like comic books are art, and I told like my students, I'm like, you don't know how crazy it is to be like in a world where comic books and superheroes thrive. Because when I was a kid, like I was picked on for liking comic books, and it wasn't until like kids at school saw I could draw them that kind of harsh and like from being picked on, because it's kind of like that Peter Parker Spider-Man. No one people pick on Peter Parker and they think he's the geek, but when you're actually drawing Spider-Man, they're like, shit, he can draw. And that's what kind of was just like, yeah. So I mean, and especially with during that year when you had McFarlane and Bagley doing Spider-Man art,
Yeah.
God, it was the greatest.
Yeah. We had Brett Thompson of Eon Boards and Ink on a couple months back, and he had kind of brought up that he was like, in his opinion, he thought comic book artists were some of the best artists, and that's not to demean or diss any other kind of art level painting, all that kind of stuff. But when you look at comic book artists, you have to be a fashion designer, you have to be an architect, you have to be all of these different things, because you are building a world and you are drawing environments and you're putting your characters in, interacting in this world, and they all have to be fairly believable for the reader. So I mean, it really, the medium of being a comic book artist or a cartoonist, whatever, that never really offended me, but still being an artist in that medium is, I think, a very tough, and if you can succeed in it, I think you are amongst some of the best artists in the world for what you do. And that spans all comics, manga, all that kind of shit,
And you got to do that on a deadline, a 4-week deadline.
I'll tell. I was talking to not name drop. I hate when
Go
I
for
hate
it, man.
I was talking to Andy Kubert, and
Nice.
we were talking because he's one of my favorites. Like
I love Andy.
like
I love both Kubert brothers.
And so I met him at a convention like a decade ago, and then like just from me being in the convention scene, you run into him, and like so I was talking to him, and we were talking about deadlines, and like I was telling him, oh yeah, I was up for like 48 hours one time because I was working on the Kevin Smith cartoon show, and when he was doing his film Tusk, I had to do production posters because it's about the two podcasters. So all the podcast posters in the movie I was doing for them, and I was teaching and I was working on the Shatner book. So I was up for 48 straight hours. And he was like, and he told me, he's like, I know. He's like, because if it aren't for deadlines, we get nothing done. Because like we're working, because we're our own, like I know we have our editors and stuff, but we're our harshest critic and our harshest editor. And it isn't until that time crunch comes in when you're just like, fuck it, I got to get this thing done and in before it crushes me. So I always remember I always remember that conversation I have with him. Like, if it weren't for deadlines, I get nothing done because like you are seriously pushed, and then you got to get, and I think that's what has helped, further on when working on creator and stuff, is because you have to set your own deadlines. I think we're here when we say, all right, I need to get these previews done and these shots done, so I can be on track to ink these, because I know a lot of these are going to change, but I got to set myself to this high standard.
Yep. No, that is really, really good advice. And that was actually, being in the independent scene and working on my own book now, I never liked deadlines because I always thought somebody else was kind of controlling what I wanted to do. And I was like, this is my project, But when I brought my writer in, Joel Rodriguez, one of the things he did, and we brought an editor in too, and one of the things they sat down and we talked about was establishing a deadline, and not a deadline to where if I didn't get there, that they could just wave their finger at me, you know, and whatever. But it was just more or less to keep me on track of saying like, hey, now you have a goal. Like, what do you want to do with this book? When do you want it to get done? When do you want to get the ash can done or the preview done? Let's set that deadline and then work towards it, you know? And that I finally caved into it, and I'm glad I did, because it does kind of keep me motivated. Because, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I work a 40-hour job. I have a full-time family. And there are times when I come home and I'm beat-ass tired, and I don't want to do a damn thing, you know? And then in the past, I used to go, like, sometimes 2 weeks without working on my project because I just get into the doldrums of life, you know? And having that deadline, it really does kind of keep you a little bit more on track of being like, I have to get something done this week to make sure I have progress by this time over here, you know? So deadlines is a great thing.
And I think that's the thing about comics. It's such a labor of love. And I think that's why so many people love it. I think people love to read it because we love to create it. And you can tell a really good book from a really shitty book because you can tell whether it was done with love or if it was done to try to push an agenda. Like, I think Mike shared it before we started talking, and I know we all commented that Snake Eyes Dead Game by Rob Liefeld. What a fucking book.
Dude, that book is so badass.
The storytelling, I think it's some of his finest work. Like, the penmanship, his inking is so clean and deliberate, and you can just tell like it was made with such a labor of love. And I mean, I think you brought it up best. Like, you know, when I'm teaching, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning. I don't get home till 6:30 at night. You're dealing with middle schoolers who are either getting in fights or breaking down crying in the middle of class because their boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them, and by the time you're just wiped. And like, because I'm going to grad school too, so sometimes I wouldn't even come home till like 10:30, and then you're just like, what am I going to do? And you just nothing. And I just found like it's become that part of me where if I don't do it, like if I don't get home and I don't draw every day, I feel like I've wasted my day. And then I think that's a good mindset for any artist, because even if it's crap and you throw it away the next day, it would have been crap that you've done later those days that you wouldn't have liked anyway. So it's good. I use it as those long days as a thumbnail day, because I like to set a story and see, because I know I'm going to change my thumbnails and they're real quick. So that way I can get to another page quicker, because on those days where I'm just beat and shot, I'm like, I look at it again and be like, wait a second. I think if he's crouching, it does a better angle up to get to that next page. And that's something I probably would have wasted days by not drawing.
It's fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. Damn it! I knew it. I was holding on to it. I was like, it's gonna be important. It's gonna fall right in line. And it's gone. Mike, do you have anything to add? I'm gonna see if this thought will come back.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of lucky with. I've had deadlines before for stuff, but I'm kind of lucky with Mark that, I mean, we're so far ahead anyway because we're doing our second chance campaign. Volume 2 is already done, so. But like, I always have the days where it's like almost done with the whole page, not working. So then I just
redraw it all.
Yep.
No.
And I mean, I don't ever have a problem with that, because I feel like if I don't totally redraw, if I don't almost get done with the page and then have to totally redraw it, something's wrong. But that's just my method.
Because it's like your best, you're when we're our biggest critic, and you know what's going to make for a good page, what's going to make for that great page. So redrawing it makes for that great page, and that's what makes for a successful book.
I think my issue usually is I'm so into the moment that it's not till when I'm like done for the night and I take a step back and I go, ooh, you know, that's usually where I get myself. So,
I remember what I was going to say, but to play off what you were just saying, the one thing I race a lot, and I try to draw really, really light when I'm doing page layout, because I know that there's going to be a panel that I absolutely love, and I don't want to fuck the page up because I don't want to redo that panel, because it's, in my opinion, it's like beautiful. That's what's motivating me right now, is that panel. And then like I might stay on another panel forever where I'm just drawing, erasing, because it's just whatever I'm trying to get out in my head is not looking right on the paper. And I have to say that working on Eon boards is awesome because they take so much abuse, and I need that because in the past I've ruined pages because I was erasing so much. Yeah, dude, I just got that too. That's fucking awesome.
It's really awesome.
So I've never had to redo an entire page, but I've erased a lot of a page, just leaving like one panel that I really liked or one pose that was like, I got to keep this because this is the only good thing about this page, and I'm drawing everything else. I was going to touch back to what you were talking about, Phil, when bringing up Snake Eyes, and I agree with you. I think this is absolutely some of Rob's best work that I've seen lately, and the entire book's great. The way the panel work, the art itself is really nice and crisp. Adelso coming on and adding additional inks, it just takes it to another level.
Yep.
But the cool thing about art and what you touched on, what you can see is that when somebody's really into what they're doing, and I love that one too. Yeah. When they're really into what they're doing, you can see that in the page, and it comes through in such a beautiful fashion. And then you can take that same artist and you can look back through their career, and you could probably find a project that maybe they weren't as into, and you can see the difference, And I think that's one thing that's unique about being a comic book artist, because I myself have gone through that too. I've taken on a project that I wasn't too excited about, but I just did it because I wanted to do it. And then I got into it, and I found out that passion did not spark, and I just kept on doing it, and I did not produce my best work. And then I do something that, like right now, my book I'm working on, I think I'm producing my best work. And it's because my all is into it, Yeah. So that was a really good, analogy, or a really good point that you brought up with all that.
And I think, when I was working for the Smodco cartoon show, I was working. I was hired to be the comic book guy, right? So I always was doing the comic books. Cartoons. I did one where it was like Batman, like Kevin Smith talks about like the birth of his child, and he talks about how it would have been so much better had Batman been there, right? So I drew all the crazy scenarios, right? Like Batman's in the closet while Kevin's banging his wife, right? He's like Batman was there even at the start of it, and so like I remember I was just so infatuated with like drawing all the comic book stuff, and so then they said, well, why don't you do something else? They wanted me to, and I think it was a bit of the challenge where it's like, because another animator who did something for another show for Smodco did a superhero one. And they're like, Phil, do another superhero one. Do a non-superhero one. So I did one with Kevin as a little kid when he first stumbled upon like his first porno, right? And I made it like little Kevin discovers his kazoo. And it was like the most fun I've ever had, like, working on a cartoon, because I would have never, like, if I didn't get out of that superhero mold for a second, I wouldn't have challenged myself as an artist. And I just found that when you weren't trying to focus in on a superhero topic, your options were wide open to listen to something else. And he loved it so much that I ended up having to do another one, right? Like a little Kevin series. And it was during that I did one like storyboard for it. And what you reminded me of when you picked a panel, Joe, and it was motivating me to do that cartoon, but it didn't fit in there. And he told me so Kevin, when I got my production notes back, he basically said, Phil, I know you love this, but as George Orwell said, you got to kill your babies, right? And you can love something so much and try to work around it, but if it doesn't fit, you got to kill it. He's like, because he's like, creating art is your baby. And if it just doesn't fit, you got to kill it. And I think it's hard the first time you do it, but now I feel like I'm my own slaughterhouse, because what I love one moment, I'm like, that doesn't fit in, chop away, it's got to go. So I think as artists, like, to your point, find that motivation, and also be able to let go on some things, because you're gonna waste time.
Yeah.
Like if you just feel it's not right, then it's not right. And if it means you gotta let something go that you love, you gotta let it go. So it's always a give and take. And I think you bringing up that point, like, you find that motivation, so you gotta keep that motivation going, and even if it means you gotta kill something you love.
Yeah, that was a perfect way of saying it, because I think it was it wasn't until I started watching Jim Lee on Twitch and watching him live draw and realizing how much he erased things and how just it was I don't like it, it's done. Even though I'm sitting here thinking, man, that's looking really cool, and he's like, boom, it's completely gone. That opened my eyes completely to being able to say, hey, if you're not liking it, it's okay to completely start over. And once I got that realization, I think my level of good productive work went up a bit, because there was times where I would be stuck on a page because I didn't want to erase it, because there was maybe I really liked how the face looked, but everything else wasn't looking that good. But I didn't want to lose the face, so I would just try to make everything else work with it. And ultimately, I would get done with it and be like, yeah, I like it, but it didn't turn out the way that it should. And so from that point on, now I've just been like, I've erased so much stuff that I've absolutely loved because I just couldn't make it work. But in the final product, I was like, I'm glad I did that, because when I actually did make it work and completely redraw it from a different angle or whatever, this is what it was meant to be, and this is what it looks best at. So that's some great advice there, to be able to let something go, to kill your baby, however you want to put it, to produce something better. I think definitely good.
Yeah, so and again, what I think, and that's what I think makes the '90s the greatest era in comics. I know I get a lot of shit for saying that, but I'm with good
Not on this
company.
show.
So
We are
this
preaching to
is
the choir.
the safe zone, the safe place, and it's again, like, you could tell, I remember reading the story in my Gambit fanzine that I got that had like a little pewter figure, and it talked about some of the backstage news, which I live for. Like, I'm a wrestling fan all my life, so I would love listening to the dirt sheets and stuff. And I think the comic book industry, like, I love to listen to some of the dirt sheets, especially when you're a kid, and like what really influenced you. And like when Claremont stepped away from the X-Men, and to which Fabian Nicieza took over. And I always wondered, why did Claremont leave? And he says it was always him combating with editors, right? And through the little Gambit fanzine, it talks about the direction of Gambit is what caused that split, because Claremont always created Gambit with a slow burn that eventually he's gonna be Mr. Sinister. And the fact that he put like a seed, like it was a clone. He was supposed to be like a third Summers brother, so he spliced the DNA of Scott and Alex Summers, and put his own like Sinister DNA, and he created this Gambit figure. And he was eventually going to turn into Sinister and take out the X-Men from the inside after working with them for so long. Jim Lee was like, that was never my intention. I just wanted to create like the James Bond character of the X-Men, like, because Wolverine took Shadow Cat under his wing, and then he was doing the same with Jubilee, that they lost that badass smoking cool guy in there, and that was his vision for Gambit. So like Gambit was in the animated series, and they were pushing out books that had his name on it. So Claremont was wanted to start, said, all right, here's the go. We're gonna do it. And they're like, and the editors sided with Jim, saying, no, Gambit's too much of a commodity to burn him out like that. And that's when Claremont left. And then later they rekindled and worked on Wildcat's arc together. But I just loved finding that out. Like you see the creators get together, and I think that's why Jim is such, like, he's a titan of comics, because that love of just not his art, but of the characters he was creating and putting out there. Like he went to bat for that character. Like, if I was an artist at the time, I don't think I would have had the balls to say to Chris Claremont. Like, I would have been like, yes, Chris. As much as I love this creator character, like, he was just like, no, I don't see it that way. I think that's what makes Image Comics so great. It's what makes Spawn such a, everlasting character. Like, I love looking back at The Devil's in the Details, the Todd McFarlane book, and seeing all the preliminary Spawn drawings that he had when he was like 16 years old.
Spawn in space.
Yeah,
right? And you just saw all that great stuff, and it turned into, well, I'm taking my. Oh, did you? I was so
Nice.
like I stood out at Midtown Comics
I don't know that.
in New York for for it to get done
So
a
beautiful.
signing by Todd, and it was so
So
cold,
awesome.
so cold, and there were rats on there, and I made a joke. I'm like, hey, we're in this fun alleyway, right?
Nice.
Because they made us in there, and Todd McFarlane comes out, and he comes out in the cold, right? He's like, don't stand in that alley, guys. Go ahead and go around the corner, right? So he made like Midtown, like go wrap around there, and he was
Nice.
just like, and he's like, I want to thank you all for coming out and supporting it, and I think that's what and I think I think that's how comics is, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of this independent resurgence. These crowdfunding books. If you see a crowdfunding book, support it because the best stories are in those books now. And I think and I'm just not saying that because like Mark Polton's my friend and Graveyard Shift, and he wrote Graveyard Shift, which is an amazing book. It's the fact that we're putting our love into these books and we know
Yeah.
what we love. And we're all from this generation of 90s comics that we love that I think our elders have always said, no, fuck that. That's shit artwork. It's like, I love
Right.
the Clone Saga. I love Maximum Carnage. And I
Oh, yeah.
talked to Tom DeFalco once, and he was just like, "You love that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not the artist I am today without Maximum Carnage, right?"
Yeah, that was an awesome series.
And so I think we're all at that age now where we're producing the artwork we love, and I think that's why, and that's why I'm excited for your book, Joe. Mike, I'm excited. I'm excited that U.S. Assassin's getting a volume 2.
Yeah, so cool.
I think it's important that we all artists support art and we keep that fresh blood of 90s love in comics today.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. We got about 13 minutes left in the show, but I wanted to touch on something you and the three of us, were talking about backstage. And I think it kind of alludes to your different ability to draw different styles of art, which I always think is really, really cool. Because not that I can't, but I've never tried drawing any other style than what my style developed into. So I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm in a box, but I draw what I draw, and that's what I draw. But you can draw a bunch of different styles. And you were telling us about this Batman cover that you did for Batman 50, the Batman Wedding. Why don't you go ahead and go into that story? I'm going to bring up the art so everybody can see what we were talking about.
Cool. So I think that we're comic book companies and distributors are now at a time where they want retailer incentive covers, and I know Unknown Comics is a big one for it. So you get a bunch. So a lot of these comic book stores, they have retail incentive covers, and I always thought, well, I've always been to the dance with Marvel, but I was never asked to dance with them, I guess, as it were. So I was, and I had a cover that was supposed to come out, and due to production and the series getting canceled, it never came out. So I ended up getting the books sent to me by my editor at the time. So I had a big pile that I could sell at conventions and be like, yeah, here's the book that my name was on and everything. So I said, you know what? I'm tired of not having my physical books in hand. I'm going to make it happen. So I went to my local comic shop and I said, listen, I want to do a retailer incentive comic. What can you do about this? And I remember for a better part of a year, they were talking about how Batman and Catwoman were getting married. And I said, if we're gonna jump on one, because it's got to make sense for both the retail store and Diamond, who was distributing DC at the time, and DC, who's putting the book at the time. So you got to pick and choose your spots. I said, this is the book I want. So I went to my comic book store. I said, what can we do to get a retailer incentive comic? And they said, well, I'll talk to my guy from Diamond, and DC was kind of cool. And they just said, listen, as long as you can get as many, you can sell this amount of books, it's going to be huge. So just let us know how many covers you want to do. So I figured, well, I thought to myself, well, how long do comic book marriages actually last? Right. Like how many, someone's going to die, something's going to happen. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do 3 covers. I said, can I do 3 covers? I'm like, sure. So I said I'm going to make it a celebration of Batman and Catwoman. So the one in the middle is my comic book style. So I said I'm going to do one that's just me and my regular style, right? I'm going to do my crazy cross hatching, my hatching,
Yeah.
whatever. So I said I'm going to make it like the Joker's marrying. There's marrying Batman and Catwoman. So then I said, all right, well, what can I celebrate the movie version? Now I'm a big Prince fan, a huge Prince fan. I was driving from home, and I was really thinking, how can I compose this cover? And all I hear was I have my Prince album going in the car, and I hear him go, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to get through this thing called life." And I said, "Fuck, that's it. I'm gonna." So I said, I'm gonna have Prince marry Batman and Catwoman. But I said, no, it's not gonna make sense. Like, it only makes sense to those in the '89. Like,
Right.
get it. So I said, I'm gonna have Joker marry Batman and Catwoman, and then the other one I'm gonna have more of a realistic style to it. I'm gonna do a realistic representation of Prince. I'm gonna try to do my best Michael Keaton Batman, and
Did a
then
great job with Michael Keaton. Like you can
thank
tell
you.
how bad that's Michael Keaton does.
It's
Yeah.
all about the lips. It's
It
all
is
about
about
the
yeah,
lips,
I
my
was saying,
friend, right?
yep. It is, yep.
So I said, all right. And then I said, well, what's the third and final way I can celebrate it? I said, I was like, fuck, I'll do the animated series. It's what I grew up on. It's what my dad sat me down to watch Batman the animated series when I was a kid because he loves Batman. That's always been his guy. And I always said, my one goal, since my name is Philip Mcnulty Jr., my one goal in life was to work on a Batman book so that my dad could also have his name on a Batman book too.
Nice.
Um,
Nice.
so I said, you know what? My dad sat me down to watch Batman the animated series when I was a kid, and that's when I fell in love with X-Men because it was Night of the Sentinels, right? So it worked out in that way. So I said, I'm going to do the animated series as a callback. So I ended up doing these three styles, and it was all cool. You just send in your PDF file, they print it. All they had to do is print it because on the back of the book it says this is a special cover presented by, and it has the name of the comic book shop. So it works. So if any of
Right.
you aspiring artists out there want to get your name out there and get recognition right away, go to your local comic shop, talk with them, talk with whoever the distributor is, see if you can get a retailer incentive one. And they're going to be hard, but if they feel like the book is going to be a smash hit, they're going to go for it. And Batman 50, they were plugging for over a year. So they were giving it like left and right. There were some small comic book shops getting one, the big ones getting one. So I just did a lot of research, a lot of time and effort. And so one morning I just got a phone call, right? And it was from a number I didn't know. And they're like, hey, it was from a comic book website. And they're like, listen, we want to let you know that you got third place on a 75 Batman top 75 Batman 50 covers, and I was like, oh my god!
Awesome.
And they told me, well, first was Jim Lee, and then second was Alex Ross, and then third was you, and I'm just like,
That's awesome.
fucking shoot me now, because there's no way. Like I told them, I made a joke to my brother. I'm like, just put that on my gravestone when I die, like. Third
Right.
place behind Jim Lee and Alex Ross. Like just put that. So I think again, you got to make it happen. I think you got to go reach out, and you got to take a chance. Like if I didn't take a chance on doing an animated cartoon that cost me weeks of work from my one project, but landed me into working in animation, I would have never been able to, because with the um, Shatner book, like when Comic Book Men was on, um, they were promoting Man of War on Comic Book Men, and Kevin Smith said, "Oh, Phil McNulty," and he's like, "Yeah, I know Phil McNulty," and like I just thought it was funny, like these two guys had a conversation about me, and it was I think it just speaks to
That's cool.
the person that Kevin Smith is. Saw that one of his employees was doing something cool, and he said, well, let's get him on the show. So I ended up having to draw Kevin and the rest of the Comic Book Men cast into Man of War, like issue 12 or so. So I think it was just cool, like never. And I think one thing I learned throughout the years was, if your end goal is to be in Marvel and DC, think about there's only a limited amount of titles that can happen and for you to happen. And if you solely base your success on being Marvel or DC, you're going to be very sad a lot of the time, because even the greats, like I love Ben Reilly and Stephen Butler, co-creator of Ben Reilly, he hasn't been in Marvel for God 20 plus years, right? And he works on his independent books. He's worked on Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff. So I think, yeah, it's great. Make it happen, but also do your creator and stuff, because you can do a lot of crazy things and you just don't have to be orthodox about it. So for all your artists out there, call your own shot. Just don't sit back and hope that it happens, because it probably won't. So you got to go out and just kind of take it yourself.
Yeah, no, that's awesome advice. I just wanted to point out real quick, I love your actual style.
Thank you.
As a badass Joker, it's got a very Jim Lee feel to a lot of this.
A little bit of Brian Bolton on that face.
Yeah. It's just like, to me, that's like that classic Joker look. Like that's what he should look like. And then you absolutely fucking nailed it with the Batman the Animated Series look. Yeah. I mean, that's just a gorgeous looking Joker face. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I would have said that was the artist from the animated series putting that out. That's just
thank you. Yeah,
fantastic work.
My brother was like, when he heard I got third place, he's like, "Oh, I bet you was that animated series one," and he thought it was He thought it was being real funny, because he was just like, "You wanted to." He's like, "Here was you getting recognized, and it was when you did it, not your style, right?" But luckily, it was my own style, so thank God. Like, I didn't want, because
right.
he made me call up the guy again. Like, I felt like such an asshole, like so vain, being like, "Which one was it?" Because I really didn't want it. So, but yeah, I think, and that's cool. Be adaptive. Be whatever. Like, you don't ever lose yourself. But if someone wants you to adapt, always adapt, because you never know what's going to take you.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I want to bring up some more of your art. Like, I think this is just a killer fucking Spawn, dude. Like, when you sent me this when we were talking earlier in the week, I was just like, oh my God, I'm so jealous. Like, that's super cool looking. And you did the colors for this and everything, right?
Yeah, I pencil, ink, and I color everything myself. I worked when I started out. Someone else inked my work, and it was just bad. Like, they took, like, I mean, not bad, but they took away every cross-hatching line that I detailed. And he's like, "Oh, I'm more of a Kirby influence guy." I'm like, that doesn't give you the right to fucking trash my hard work to kill off my lines. So I started to work my work myself, and I did it digitally. And I think that was a saving grace, because you push out work faster. If you can ink your own stuff, then your pencils don't have to be as tight, and then you can get the product out there faster. And then coloring is just something I just love 90s. I love flat colors. If you get more than 2 colors on there, power to you. I think sometimes if you can get a really good colorist, like, oh God, they're the best in the world. But sometimes I just want to do it myself, because it reminds me more of my 90s style. And that was
fun too, doing that kind of stuff. It is, Yeah. There's another one I really like, this whole X-Men 92 cover, because this, to me, when I think of the X-Men, this is what I think of. This is what I always think of, because this is what I grew up on. This team, the animated series, obviously, but like the Jim Lee stuff, X-Men #1, and you just captured it awesomely here. This is just love the way everybody looks. Gripped. I almost said Grifter. Gambit looks cool. I love Rogue, because I was in love with Rogue for the longest time. And her tits look awesome right there. So I mean, great job with that.
My first crush ever was Rogue, and I told Sean in one of our first conversations, like, I know I wasn't gay, because I saw Rogue in the animated series with Apocalypse, and her butt was out there, and I'm just like, damn, what is that?
Well, something about the suit too, just the way the lines go down, and just like accentuates everything. Like, Jim Lee knew what he was doing when he was doing that design of the character. Elliot Rodriguez says that's some amazing versatility. Great job on those covers. They look great. High compliments, man, because Elliot's a really good artist as well. I mean, that's and like I said, man, you got some killer stuff. I've really enjoyed looking at your stuff since we started talking earlier in the week. Let's see. We're right around that hour mark, so we'll definitely have to get you back on, man, because I feel like you have a lot of interesting stories. I'd like to dive into more of the Shatner stuff and the Kevin Smith stuff. So we'll have to book another date and dive more into like individual stories, because I think there'll be some really cool, entertaining stuff there.
You got it, man.
But before we get out of here, why don't you go ahead and plug yourself, whatever you're working on now, what you need people to know about, all your social media sites. Just blow your load on everybody right now.
Thank you. So here we go. We're gonna do one powerful shot. So Facebook animated Phil art is where you can find all my art. Facebook at animated Phil on Instagram. New artwork will be popping up there because my creator-owned series, I'm actually going to start putting out some previews for that as we get ready to start our crowdfunding campaign. So if you love 90s, check it out because it's a true love letter to the 90s. And I love wrestling. I do a podcast with Mark Polton called The Pod Gods. So if you're interested in some art and wrestling hot takes, you can find me on Twitter at AnimatedPhil. So just cool. If you want to hit me up, go ahead, hit me up. I'm easily accessible.
Hey, that is awesome. Yeah, and maybe next time we'll have to dip into a little bit of wrestling talk too, because I could get into some old wrestling talk. Maybe not the current stuff, but some old stuff.
Attitude Era is my jam.
There you go. Yep, all about that. Mike, why don't you drop your knowledge on us?
Mike McMahon 74 on Twitter. Mike McMahon on YouTube. Facebook, there's a U.S. Assassin fan page. Go check it out. I try to drop sneak peeks at least weekly. Right now we're in the middle of our Second Chance campaign for those that didn't get U.S. Assassin. Real quick, I can find it. This beautiful book could be yours for the small price of your soul. I mean, $25. But we're doing the Second Chance campaign for those that didn't get it for the Graveyard Shift 2 freebie. And then as soon as that rolls out, we're going to start the campaign for Volume 2 because it's done. It's drawn. Colors are happening. Nice. All the wheels are moving. And I'm already on Volume 3, so it's going to be one right after another. Keep the train moving.
And for those that don't know, Mike has been riding shotgun here with me. Shotgun. Side, what do you want to say? Co-host here, filling in for Sean Ahrendt, who will be back in a few weeks. But next week is going to be Mike's last show co-hosting with us. So I'll get all mushy next week. I just want to say that, I've been thoroughly happy that you jumped in here the minute that you did and helped us out with the show. It makes it a lot better when there's two hosts because we can it's a lot more fun for me. Otherwise, I'll just ramble because that's what I do. I was a front man for a heavy metal band, and that's all I did. I just rambled. That's it. So that's my tendency.
Well, I love Sean, and it's been great to get to know you. I mean, I don't think I'd have had this opportunity to know you as well as I do now with without stepping in for Sean, unfortunately, due to horrible circumstances. But
can't
wait to see him back. Love my man.
Yes, sir. Sean, we miss you, and we will look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Next week, we got El Guapo on, which I messed up last week. I had my guests all switched. My calendar was all fucked up. But we got El Guapo on next week. But as of right now, we have Phil Mcnulty. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It was a pleasure talking to you. We'll definitely get you on and talk more. You have had an interesting career. Killer art. I hope everybody that watch this or that will watch this, if you're watching it back on YouTube or on Facebook, go check out his work. You can go check out his creator-owned stuff. Same with Mike. And as far as me, you can find me on all the social media sites. And me. You can find me on all the social media sites. But if you're watching this on Facebook, please go to the YouTube channel under Joe M. Sonntag or Sean Ahrendt and give us a subscribe, a like, and share because that really helps out the show. We get most of our views on Facebook, which is awesome, but we're really trying to build up the YouTube channels more. So help us out in that aspect. We would definitely appreciate it. So until next Friday, until another exciting, sexy, pornographic episode of the Odd and Stuff Show. This is us signing off and saying, enjoy your weekend, love each other, peace, not war, make love.
Burn some
keep
lead.
crazy stuff in the street.
Burn some lead.
Burn some motherfucking lead. Pencils up, motherfuckers. All right. See you later. Peace.
Hey.